So there was this experiment that was done on a group of seminary students back in 1970. And I feel like this date is important because who knows if these students gave their permission for the study. But regardless, the study was on this group of seminarians, future leaders of the church, at Princeton University. Okay, all students studying to be future leaders of the church, and this is how the experiment went. After studying the parable of the Good Samaritan, the gospel story that we just heard, these students were asked to prepare a short talk, a short speech on this parable, and then they were given directions to another building on campus that they were to go to give this lesson about the Good Samaritan to. Okay? Now, what they didn't know is that along the way to this new building, the researchers had planted an actor. And this actor was going to be slumped down on the ground. They were in distress. They were coughing and they were groaning, clearly needing help. And these researchers wanted to see if these students were going to stop and help. Now, more information. To one of the groups of students as they were leaving, the researchers would casually say, hey, the talk's not going to start for a few minutes. You've got time, but you might as well just go ahead and leave now. So they would go on their way. And then to the other group of students, as they were leaving, they'd look at their watch and say, oh, wow, you're already running late. They were expecting you a few minutes ago. You better go. Now, with that information, you can unfortunately probably guess what happened. To that group of students that thought that they were running late to give this talk, only 10% of them stopped to help that person who was needing help. So seminary students, on their way to give a lesson about the Good Samaritan, literally stepped over a person needing help because they thought they were running late. And now the other students, the other group that they thought they had time to spare, they didn't score 100% on this experiment, but they did a lot better, okay? They were about in the 60 or 70 percentile range of stopping to help. So, this story of the Good Samaritan, it is so beloved, it is so well known, and I feel like this is our gospel story today where even if you know nothing about the Bible, no other stories, you know this one. And I think that's because this story has just been embedded into so many of our basic culture elements everywhere, right? So we have both laws and Boy Scout merit badges that have been named after this story. The headlines crown people with the Good Samaritan title when they do these heroic acts of kindness. I did my own little very casual experiment this week where I just went into my 5-year-old's bookshelf and I found all the children's books that were there that were spin-offs of the Good Samaritan story. Okay, so we've got The Little Engine That Could, classic and beloved. Maybe not well as known, but one of our personal faves, The Smeds and the Smoos. Okay. We've got this one, Who is My Neighbor? And then we have this overdue library book. That's great. It's called The Help, right? And these were just the books that happened to be on the shelf, okay? This story is everywhere. We know this one. And this is a parable. Not only is it well known, but it also has a very clear-cut direction of what is right and wrong in this story, right? Some of Jesus's parables, we read them, and they're a bit more nuanced. They're ambiguous. There are many different ways they could be interpreted. But this one we've got, When we hear this story, we don't think, man, I just really wish I was more like that priest. Or I wish I was really more like that Levite who didn't stop to help, And when I read The Little Engine That Could to my boys, I don't say, and I really hope you grow up to be someday to be like that new shiny engine that doesn't help to stop the broken down train full of toys and food for the children on the other side of the mountain, right? We don't say that. We call it the Good Samaritan story when the word good isn't even in the actual story because we know what was the right and the kind and the compassionate thing to do. It makes it a really interesting gospel story to preach about because intellectually, we already understand the parable. But then what does it take to actually live out the story? What makes the difference so that when we leave worship today, we're going to be a part of the group that when we see somebody in need, we are part of the group that stops to help rather than a part of the group that's going to step over or pass by. So I think we start answering this question by just zooming out and looking at the bigger metaphor here in this story. So ultimately, there is only one who can save us when we are the ones who are in the ditch and hurting and wounded and simply cannot go any further on our own. And we don't call this person the Good Samaritan, we call this person the Good Shepherd, right? The one who leaves the 99 to look for the one who is lost, the one who looks for the forgotten and the overlooked and the bullied and the targeted. And his name is Jesus, and he saves us, all of us, from the ditches of life. And so because we are loved so fully and so unconditionally, because Jesus binds our wounds and carries us to green pastures and accompanies us through the darkest of valleys, then we are set free to love just as he loves. The goodness of God can flow through us, so even as lost sinners, we are also named good. We are imperfect, and we also are good. We don't have to be afraid and just scurry by the suffering we encounter. So that brings us to another story for today. So April 3rd, 1968, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was giving a speech to the striking garbage collectors of Memphis, Tennessee. Because in 1968, a full-time sanitation worker in Memphis still qualified for food stamps. So they were striking to demand a living wage. They were also striking because their dilapidated old city garbage trucks had malfunctioned that year and killed 2 of their workers in February. So Dr. King had heard of their movement, and he showed up to bring this action of solidarity. So history buffs are already going to know this, but on April 4th, 1968, the very next day, Dr. King would be killed on the Lorraine Motel balcony in Memphis. So this speech to the striking sanitation workers, it was his very last public address. So the speech is called "I've Been to the Mountaintop," and I really encourage you to go read it. A quick Google search will take you there. And actually, what I really encourage you to do is go to YouTube instead, and you can listen to the entire 43-minute speech. And this is where you can just hear his passion and clear gift for public speaking, and also a real gift. You can hear the responses of the crowd listening, and you can hear their hope swell and their grit and resilience, and it's so, so good. So, for today's Double Jeopardy question, what Bible story do you think Dr. King used to drive home his final points at the ending of his speech? And it's not a trick question. The answer is the Good Samaritan story, okay? So Dr. King spoke about how we often use our imaginations to try and figure out why the priest and the Levite didn't stop as they were walking down the road. Maybe it was because of purity laws. So based on their purity laws, they were not supposed to touch this person that was needing help. Maybe it was because they were running late. They had an important thing to get to, and they needed to go. There are so many different reasons we can come up with our imaginations of why they didn't stop. Some might be more excuses, some might be very valid reasons, but there's a whole wide range that we can think of. But then Dr. King says this, and these are his words now. But I'm going to tell you what my imagination tells me. It's possible that those men were afraid. It's possible that the priest and the Levite looked over at that man on the ground and wondered if the robbers were still around. Or it's possible that they felt like the man on the ground was merely faking, that he was acting like he had been robbed and hurt in order to seize them over there, lure them in for a quick and easy seizure. And so the first question that the priest asked, the first question that the Levite asked was this: if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But then the Good Samaritan came by and he reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? Dr. King continues with this. That's the question before you tonight. Not if I stop to help the sanitation workers, what will happen to my job? Not if I stop to help the sanitation workers, what will happen to all the hours I usually spend in my office every day and every week as a pastor? The question is not, if I stop to help this man in need, what will happen to me? The question is, if I do not stop to help the sanitation workers, what will happen to them? That's the question. So in our gospel story today, a lawyer is asking Jesus some questions, one of which is, who is my neighbor? And to answer, Jesus flips the question. The question is not, who is my neighbor? The question is, will I choose to be a neighbor? Will I choose to see the person that needs help, regardless of who that person is, regardless of what's going on in my own life? And will I choose to respond with love? Will I remember that I am loved, that I am called good, and that I can be a vessel of that divine love to another? That's the question. May we all go and do likewise. Amen.